The humanitarian crisis in Sudan has reached a critical point, with devastating consequences for millions of people. The latest and most alarming development, the takeover of Fasher, the capital of North Darfur state, by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces in October 2025. This event has been fiercely condemned by the United Nations and the international community as it marks a dangerous new phase in a conflict rooted in Sudan's complex history of ethnic tensions, political rivalries, and the perpetual instability. Hello viewers, welcome to What's Trending on DDM TV. In late October 2025, the RSF seized control of Fasher, which was previously one of the last strongholds held by the Sudanese armed forces in Darfur. The United Nations quickly denounced the takeover, expressing grave concern for the civilians trapped inside the city. UN reports detail horrific atrocities committed by the RSF forces, including mass killings, summary executions, and brutal attacks on hospitals and medical staff. In one tragic instance, a maternity hospital was targeted during fierce fighting, resulting in more than 460 deaths, according to the World Health Organization. The UN and human rights organizations have called for immediate protection of civilians, humanitarian access, and accountability for these war crimes, urging sanction against those responsible. The roots of this current crisis trace back many years, but intensified sharply in April 2023 when open conflict erupted between two factions that had once been allies, the Sudanese Armed Forces under General Abdel Fattah and the RSF commanded by Mohammed Hamdan. This split originated from bitter power struggle over control of the military and governance. The RSF itself originated from the Janjaweed militias, notorious for its role in the Darfur conflict that began in 2003. The Janjaweed and later the RSF were implicated in ethnic cleansing campaigns against non-Arab African group, leading to a protracted humanitarian disaster marked by genocide accusations, mass displacement, and untold suffering. The Darfur region has been historically volatile, with deep-seated grievances due to marginalization by Sudan's central government in Khartoum. The 2003 insurgency against the government demanded better political inclusion and economic development. In response, security forces and allied militias conducted scorched earth campaigns, razing villages and driving millions from their homes. Despite peace agreements, the region remained unstable, with ongoing clashes in human rights abuses. As the civil war escalated nationwide from 2023, it has caused one of the worst humanitarian crises in recent history. More than 14 million people have been displaced, either internally or as refugees in neighboring countries. Thousands have died in ongoing violence, with civilians trapped amidst artillery shelling, ground attacks, and lawlessness. Access to food, healthcare, water, and shelter is severely restricted. Aid convoys frequently encounter attacks and roadblocks, making relief operations perilous and insufficient. The fall of Fasher signifies not only a million defeat for the Sudanese armed forces, but also a humanitarian catastrophe. Eyewitnesses report widespread abuses by the RSF troops against civilians attempting to flee, including looting, torture, and sexual violence. The destruction of hospitals and clinics further imperils the already fragile health system, battling disease outbreaks and malnutrition. Without swift international intervention to secure humanitarian corridors and pressure armed groups to respect human rights, the suffering of millions, including women, children, and the elderly, will worsen dramatically. Now, the UN has 4 strategies in sequence to end this bloodshed permanently: peacekeeping, peacemaking, peace enforcement, and peace building. Initially, the UN should deploy peacekeepers to key conflict zones like Fasher and other vulnerable areas in Sudan. Peacekeepers are composed of soldiers and police from various countries, act as neutral protection, maintaining ceasefires, separating fighting factions, and safeguarding civilians and humanitarian aid workers. Their presence builds a security buffer that helps prevent further violence and ensures humanitarian assistance can reach displaced populations. Peacekeeping operations require the consent of Sudan's government or conflicting parties, facilitating cooperation rather than confrontation. This step is crucial for minimizing immediate suffering and creating a safer environment for dialogue. While peacekeepers stabilize the situation, parallel diplomatic efforts should intensify to bring Sudan's warring factions to the negotiating table. Neutral mediators from the UN, African Union, and the trusted international partners must facilitate talks focusing on ceasefires, political power sharing, and addressing long-standing grievances. Peacemaking emphasizes dialogue and agreement, recognizing that military interventions alone cannot solve deep-rooted political and ethnic conflicts. Effective peacemaking opens pathways to political solutions, reduces hostility, and encourages stakeholders to commit to peace. Now, if fighting persists or escalates despite peacemaking and peacekeeping, the UN Security Council may authorize peace enforcement. Peace enforcement involves the use of robust military force to protect civilians, disarm militias, and compel compliance with peace agreements, even without all parties' consent. It is a last resort measure implemented when less forceful strategies fail or mass atrocities continue. In Sudan, peace enforcement could target groups like the RSF that have committed massacres and reject peaceful settlements, using military power to stop violence and restore order. However, peace enforcement requires clear mandates, strong international backing, and careful management to avoid unintended escalation. Once peace is achieved or hostilities significantly decrease, the UN should rapidly transition to peace building, focusing on long-term recovery. This involves rebuilding infrastructure such as schools and hospitals, restoring governance and rule of law, promoting reconciliation among divided communities, and fostering economic development. Peace building addresses root causes of conflict, marginalization, inequality, and weak institutions, thus preventing escape into violence. Supporting Sudan's social, political, and economic healing ensures that peace is sustainable and inclusive. That's it for this episode. For what's trending, for more insights, do ensure you hit the like button, make your comments, share my videos, and subscribe to DDM TV. I am Tochku Raphael. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Mr. President, I urge colleagues, if you haven't already, to study the latest satellite imagery of Fasher, blood on the sand. Mr. President, I urge colleagues to study the world's continued failure to stop this. Blood on the hands. What is unfolding in Fasher recalls the horrors that Darfur was subjected to 20 years ago. But what is different today is that we're seeing a different global reaction, one of resignation. So this is also a crisis of apathy. And so my simple question to the Council and to all of us working on this broken effort is this: what is it about this crisis that makes it so hard? Would previous generations of leaders and diplomats have been so impotent? If not, what are we not doing that we could be doing? Our successors will talk of our failure and the actions that we should have taken. Can we not take those actions now? Can we act with vigor, courage, honesty, collective purpose? Is this really too hard for us? If not, where is our diplomacy? Where are our values? Where is our charter? And where is our conscience? We once pledged to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war, to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of the human person, in the equal rights of men and women, and of nations large and small, and to establish conditions under which justice and international law can be maintained. Please, can we now place those pledges on the road to Fasher as an apology, as a rebuke, as a challenge, and as a promise? Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, it is an absurdity that one of the warring parties can carry on politicizing this forum by disseminating false and baseless allegations. This is a party that is directly responsible for the devastation of its own country. a party that has a record of obstructing peace efforts and refusing to agree to an immediate ceasefire, a party that has systematically expelled UN officials in a pattern of intimidation and interference in the UN's life-saving work. This week, it declared 2 senior World Food Program officials persona non grata, as famine continues to spread. Last year, the SAF expelled the Deputy Humanitarian Coordinator, and the year before that, they expelled the head of the UN mission in Sudan. The SAF has walked away from the humanitarian truce despite intensive US and Quad efforts and unequivocal UAE support. The current escalation could have been avoided. Mr. President, it's time for polite fictions and diplomatic niceties has passed. In October 2021, the Sudanese armed forces seized power in a coup with their partner at the time, the Rapid Support Forces. They dismantled a fragile democratic transition and betrayed the hopes of an entire nation. Since then, the SAF has sabotaged every credible peace effort. Its intransigence has led to the catastrophe that we are witnessing today. Since April 23, the SAF has followed the same script, bombing homes, schools, hospitals, and markets, and turning hunger into a weapon of war. The SAF punished its own people with terror, with fire, and according to credible reports, with chemical weapons. The SAF has resurrected the same extremism it once unleashed on Darfur. It derailed and dismissed every peace effort. And only a few days ago, in Washington, it rejected a proposal for a nationwide ceasefire before discussions even begun. Each time negotiations faltered, the SAF answered with more bombs. Each time diplomacy offered a door, the SAF slammed it shut. The SAF's maximalism, its military-first doctrine, has gained it nothing. Only a Sudan in ruins and its people left to starve. And as the horrors in Fasher unfold, the SAF's representatives, in breathtaking cynicism, denounce the consequences of its own war, as if it were not the architect of Sudan's misery. Mr. President, when the SAF walked away from last week's attempt to reach a humanitarian ceasefire, it did so in full knowledge of what would follow. It knew the price would be paid in Sudanese lives. It knew Fasher would burn. It did not care. Let us not forget that this is the same command that waged war on Darfur 20 years ago. The very same command that shelters men indicted for genocide, and that now claims to defend and to mourn the civilians it once sought to destroy. This is truly obscene. For more than 2 years, my country, the United Arab Emirates, regardless of the lies repeated here, has been clear. Both the SAF and the RSF has disqualified themselves from shaping Sudan's future. It is time the international community accepted that truth. No speech delivered in this hall by a representative of one of the warring factions can disguise who they are or what they are. The world must speak with Sudan's civilians, not their tormentors. Thank you, Mr. President.